Hi, everybody. We're going to start chapter 2. This is called Integers and Absolute Value. Hopefully this is a short and sweet lesson today because you've had most of this last year. So this should not take very long. So make sure you take some notes and watch till the end. Okay, so I have some vocabulary for you. And honestly, the only really vocabulary you need to write here or worry about is the word integers. Oops. What's going on? The word integers and absolute value. So first of all, integer, this is a vocabulary word you had last year, and I remember talking about this multiple times. An integer is a whole number, and they're opposites. If you want to write positive and negative whole numbers, this is also a really good definition. I feel like this is the easiest definition to remember, positive and negative whole numbers. So like positive 5, negative 3, nothing with a decimal, nothing with a fraction. Integers are only whole numbers. Okay, you know positive and negative numbers. Positive numbers are greater than 0. Negative numbers are less than 0, and they're pretty much shown with a negative in front. Okay, and then absolute value is the other vocabulary word you need to know. And this is only how far a number is from 0, and the symbol is 2 lines. You go ahead and write that, and then we're going to come and we're going to focus on absolute value a little bit more in the next few slides. So absolute value is how far a number is away from 0. And the symbol is just 2 lines. Okay. Some of the things we need to talk about are inequalities. We're going to be starting to talk about inequalities this chapter, and we talk about inequalities quite a bit coming up in the next the future chapters that we have. So make sure that you know an inequality compares two different things. This one is known as less than. Some people forget about these and they forget what they mean. So like less than, I know this kind of looks like an L. So I remember that's less than. This one is greater than. A lot of you remember the big side goes towards the bigger number, and that works fine too. That works fine too. This one is less than or equal to, and I'll talk about those a little bit in a second because those are, I think we talked about them a little bit last year, but they come into more play this year. And this is greater than or equal to. Okay, so let's talk about these two. All right, so if I say 5 is less than or equal to 10, is this true? Yes, it's true because this says greater or less than or equal to. So as long as it satisfies one of those things, then it's true. So 5 is less than or equal to 10, and it's true because it's less than, and the less than sign is in there. If I say 6 is less than or equal to 6, this is still true. Even though it says less than, it has that or equal to part in there. So that or equal to part makes it a true statement. So as long as it satisfies one of those two statements, then it's true. So if I have 10 is greater than, oops, whatever that is, greater than or equal to 8. Is 10 greater than or equal to 8? Yes, because it's greater than. It might not be equal to it, but it's still greater than. It still satisfies one of those two conditions. And let's see, let's do 12 is greater than or equal to 12. This is true because it's the or equal to part that makes this true. So make sure you know the difference between like the or equal to ones and the just the regular less than or greater than. It's easy because these lines underneath kind of gives you an idea of that's also equal to. Okay, so next thing we're going to talk about is which number is greater. And we're also going to write an inequality for these. So write inequality. Okay, so if I say 6 blank negative 4, what sign should go in between those two? It should be a greater than sign. Okay. This maybe looks like greater than or less than. I'm going to move that out of the way. So if I was going to do this one, negative 8 or negative 9, so which is greater? Well, negative 8 is greater, so technically it would look like this. Notice how I'm leaving it all in the same order. The only thing I'm changing is this right here. So if I do the next one, negative 5 or negative 5.5, negative 5, negative 5.5, The one that's greater here is negative 5. Even though this says negative 5.5, you have to think about what comes closer to 0 on the number line. Another thing I think about is temperature. What's colder here? Well, colder is negative 5.5 is colder than negative 5. So I know this is going to be the greater number. People always get mixed up on the negative signs. So negative 10 or negative 39. So let's do negative 10, 39. What should go in the middle here? Well, negative 10 is less than 39. Okay, so this one, we have 7 or negative 7. So for this one, you would do it this way because 7 is greater than negative 7. And then 9 or 4, 9 is greater than 4. Let's add another one in here. Let's do one like this. What if I said 4 or 4? So you could do this. 4, you could do this way, is greater than or equal to 4. You could do 4 is less than or equal to 4. They both satisfy it because they're both equal to 4. So just make sure you know how to write some inequalities, how to use the signs. Probably a good idea to use your notebook to help you figure out what sign means what if you're confused at that yet. Okay, absolute value is the next thing we're going to talk about. Like I said before, the absolute value symbols are these two lines. Okay, and how that reads above, it says, what is the absolute value of negative 4? The absolute value of negative 4 is 4, and the reason why it is because it's only 4 spaces from 0. Remember, it's just the spaces. So if I do this one, what this says is, what's the absolute value of 9? The absolute value of 9 is 9 because 9 is 9 spaces from 0. If I go down here, what's the absolute value of negative 10? Well, how many spaces is negative 10 from 0? So the answer is 10. Notice how every single answer to a absolute value problem is a positive number because it just wants to know how many spaces it is. It's not the opposite, it's how many spaces. So if I go to this one, it says, what's the absolute value of negative 8? Well, how many spaces is negative 8 from 0? Well, 8. And then 1, what's the absolute value of 1? Well, it's 1 space. 1. Don't get confused on this. It's not the opposite. It's not asking what the opposite is. It's asking how many spaces on the number line is it away from 0. All right, so then you might have some expressions that have absolute value bars in them. The first thing that has to get done, it's kind of like, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, is you have to do the absolute value bars. That's the first thing that has to get done because the top one said, what's the absolute value of negative 10 plus 4? So in reality, I have to find the absolute value of this first. So the absolute value of negative 10 is 10, and then I'm going to add my 4 to it, and my answer is 14. Okay, same thing here. I have what's the absolute value of negative 4? Well, it's 4. Minus the absolute value of 3, which is 3, because it's 3 spaces from 0. 4 minus 3, 1. The only time you might ever have a negative answer to a problem with absolute value bars is something like this. Notice how the negative is on the outside? So that negative is going to drop down and be part of the answer in the end if it's not included inside those absolute value bars. So I'm going to worry about this first. So really, this is what it says. Negative absolute value, I'm going to add these two together. This is 16. So then it says, what's the absolute value of 16, which is 16, and then this negative falls down with the answer. So this is the only time you can really ever have a negative in the answer is when it's on the outside of those absolute value bars. And I can do another example of that coming up. Okay, so 8 plus the absolute value of negative 2. So absolute value of negative 2 is 2, and then you're going to add your 8 to it. That's what it would look like. Let me do another example, the one with the outside. So if I have negative 3 plus 4. Okay, so first I have to find the answer to this, which should be still in my absolute value bar, 7. It's going to drop down. Then absolute value of 7 is 7, and then my negative is going to drop down, and the answer would be negative 7. So this is really the only time you can, like I said, the only time you can have a negative answer is when those absolute value bars, or when the negative's on the outside of those absolute value bars. Okay, another thing they might have you do today is they might have you compare absolute value bars. So if I do something like this, okay, and then I say, okay, put a greater than or less than or some sign in there. Okay, so what's the absolute value of negative 13? Well, it'll be 13. Absolute value of 13 is 13. Well, if it's really equal like this, you can use the equal sign. You don't have to use a greater than or less than or equal to or whatever. You can still just use the equal sign. That will work fine too. So if you're going to compare, you first have to find the absolute value and then compare using your symbols. Okay, so we always talk about keywords. Some of the keywords we're going to be talking about this chapter are keywords that go with the word negative and keywords that go with the word positive. So we might still be using the keywords we talked about last chapter for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, but we're going to be talking about keywords now that mean positive and negative. So here are some keywords for some of these that you might need to know in the future. A lot of times these show up in story problems or times that you need to write an equation from a word, from like a sentence. So make sure you remember some of these. Another one that I ran into just with the seventh graders was recede. Okay, recede also means to back up or to go backwards, so that's a negative word. Increase, gain, addition, above, all positive words. Another word you could have for positive would be deposit. Okay, that has to do with depositing money into an account. But make sure you get some of these if you don't know what they mean, like maybe you don't know what withdrawal means. Make sure you get some of these down if you need them. Because you're going to be doing stuff like this. They're going to give you a situation and you have to rate the integer for it. So what it looks like. So got to find a keyword. If it says 200 feet below sea level, here's my keyword. And then to write an integer, it would be negative 200. Keyword, a deposit of $15 would be 15. Now you could write it two ways. You could write it like this, or you could write it like this. But a lot of times we don't write positive numbers with a sign in front, so you can just write 15. And then a withdraw of $60. Withdraw would be the keyword. Be minus 60 or negative 60. So you're going to have to do this today in your homework too. So you have to look for those keywords and know what they're asking, if they're asking for a negative number or a positive number. Okay, that's all I have for you today. The other thing they might have you do is order things from least to greatest. So like if I have -2, -10, 0, 9, -9, 1, ordering these from least to greatest would be another thing you need to do. Just make sure if you need to order from least to greatest and you're not sure, you think of, okay, what's farther away from 0 on the number line that's going to be smaller? Or what I think about is temperature. What's coldest? So if I look at these numbers up here, what's coldest? Well, I know -10 is the coldest, so that's the smallest. Then I know -10 is technically or -9 is the next coldest. Then let's see what I got. -2 is the next coldest. Then I have 0, 1, 9. This is another thing you'll have to do is order things from least to greatest. But I know you know how to do this since you did it last year. So hopefully you don't have too many questions. If you do, let me know. Write them down in your notebook. But I hope you listened and took some good notes, and I'll see you tomorrow.